The massive chamber of the Galactic Council buzzed with the sounds of 100 different alien species. Some clicked their mandibles, others hummed through their breathing slits, and a few made soft chiming sounds that meant they were amused. All of this noise was directed at one human who stood alone in the center of the room. Ambassador Jake Miller had been to many difficult meetings in his 40 years of life. But this one felt different. He could feel the eyes of creatures from across the galaxy watching him, studying him like he was some kind of curious animal in a zoo. His dark suit felt heavy under the bright lights, and sweat beaded on his forehead despite the cool temperature of the chamber, the being that spoke for the council. Today was Ambassador Zekthera from the Vexstar Empire. She looked like a giant praying mantis made of green crystal, with 4 arms and compound eyes that sparkled with what Jake had learned to recognize as alien laughter. Her voice came through the translation device as a series of clicks and chirps, but the machine turned it into perfect English. "So," Zekthar said, her head tilting to one side in a way that made Jake's skin crawl, "the humans of Earth believe their little blue planet should be classified as a Class 9 death world. This is quite amusing to us." A wave of laughter swept through the chamber. The Nephilim delegates, who looked like floating jellyfish made of gas and light, pulsed with bright colors that Jake's briefing materials had told him meant they found something very funny. The Quartzians, living rocks with arms and legs, made grinding sounds that served as their version of chuckling. Jake kept his face calm and professional. Even though he wanted to smile, he had expected this reaction. "Yes, Ambassador Zekthera, Earth meets all the criteria for Deathworld classification. We have extreme weather, dangerous wildlife, toxic environments, and natural disasters that occur regularly. Our survival rate for visiting species without proper protection is estimated at less than 30%. This statement caused an even bigger wave of laughter. Ambassador Veltar from the Crystalline Collective stepped forward. He was 12 feet tall and looked like a walking diamond, with light shooting through his transparent body in patterns that showed his emotions. Right now, those patterns were bright yellow, which meant he was very amused. "Ambassador Miller," Veltar said in a voice like wind chimes, "your species has been under galactic observation for 50% of your Earth years. We have watched your people. You are soft, weak creatures who cry when you are sad and laugh when you are happy. You live on a world with gentle gravity, breathable air, and liquid water. You have not even learned to travel between stars without our help. How can you claim to come from a death world?" Jake had to bite the inside of his cheek to keep from grinning. "I understand your doubts, Ambassador Veltar. Perhaps the classification seems unusual given your observations." A new voice spoke up from the back of the chamber. This one belonged to Dr. Kicksmell, a famous scientist from the hegemony of scales. She looked like a 7-foot-tall lizard with 6 arms and scales that changed color based on her mood. Now they were a bright orange that meant she was curious, but skeptical. "I have studied the data your people submitted," Dr. Kicksmell said, her forked tongue flicking out as she spoke. "Your world does have some interesting features, I will admit. Your weather systems are more active than most civilized planets. Your gravity is higher than the galactic average. But Deathworld? That seems like an exaggeration." Jake nodded politely. "I understand your skepticism, Dr. Kicksmell. The data can only tell you so much." Ambassador Zekthara leaned forward, her compound eyes glittering.
"Tell me, Ambassador Miller."
"What is the most dangerous creature on your world?" Jake thought for a moment. This was a loaded question, and he knew it. "That depends on how you define dangerous, Ambassador. We have many creatures that could be considered threats. Give us an example," pressed Veltar. "Well, we have creatures called sharks. They are predators that live in our oceans. They can grow up to 20 feet long, have rows of razor-sharp teeth, and can smell blood in the water from miles away. They have been hunting in Earth's oceans for over 400 million years." The chamber fell quiet for a moment. 20 feet was quite large by galactic standards, and the idea of a predator that old was unsettling to most species. But then the laughter started again. "Surely you have defenses against these sharks," said a delegate from the Harmonious Collective. "A species that looked like singing crystals. Force fields, sonic barriers, genetic modifications to make them harmless." Jake shook his head. "No, we swim with them." The laughter stopped. "Excuse me, Zek. Voice had lost its amused tone.
Yes.
Humans swim in the same waters as sharks. We have sports where we surf on boards in areas where sharks hunt. Some humans dive down to study sharks up close, with no protection except a metal cage. Others swim with them freely. Dr. Kicksmell's scales turned a deep purple, which Jake's briefing materials told him meant she was confused and concerned.
That
makes no sense from a survival perspective. Why would your species deliberately put themselves in danger? Jake shrugged, a gesture that made several aliens lean back in alarm. Quick movements were considered threatening by most galactic species. We find it exciting. Many humans enjoy activities that other species might consider dangerous. What other activities? Beltar asked, his light patterns now a nervous blue. Well, we have a sport called mountain climbing, where humans scale vertical rock faces thousands of feet high using only ropes and metal spikes. You have another sport called skydiving, where we jump out of flying aircraft and fall toward the ground at high speed. Opening a cloth parachute at the last moment to slow our descent, the chamber was completely silent now. Several delegates were making rapid notes on their data devices. We also have motor racing, where humans drive vehicles at speeds over 200 miles per hour in close formation. We have martial arts, where humans fight each other with their bare hands for sport. We have extreme weather enthusiasts who deliberately travel to areas where dangerous storms are occurring to study them up close. Ambassador Zektharis' mandibles clicked nervously. These sound like the activities of a death-seeking species, not a civilized one. Jake allowed himself a small smile. We don't seek death, Ambassador, we seek challenge. We seek to test ourselves against the dangers our world presents. It's how we've survived and thrived for hundreds of thousands of years. The silence stretched on for several minutes. Jake could see the aliens exchanging glances, their various forms of communication creating a low buzz of activity around the chamber. Finally, Ambassador Veltar spoke.
Apps,
he said slowly. We have made some incorrect assumptions about your species and your world. Perhaps, Jake agreed. Dr. Kicksmell stepped forward, her scales now a thoughtful green. I think a direct assessment would be beneficial. We should send a delegation to Earth to observe these conditions firsthand. Zekthara nodded. Yes, I agree. We will organize a cultural exchange. A group of our finest young diplomats and scientists will visit your Earth for one standard galactic week. They will assess your Deathworld claims and report back to the Council. Jake's smile widened slightly. We would be honored to host such a delegation, Ambassador Zekthara. I think you'll find the experience quite educational. I'm sure we will, Zekthara replied, though her tone suggested she thought the education would be about human exaggeration rather than actual danger. The vote was taken quickly. All species agreed to the cultural exchange. As Jake left the chamber, he could hear the aliens already discussing who would be brave enough to visit the human Deathworld. Jake walked slowly back to his quarters, his mind already working on the arrangements that would need to be made. The aliens thought they were calling humanity's bluff. They had no idea what they were about to experience. Earth was indeed a Deathworld, but not in the way the galaxy understood Deathworlds. Earth was something far more dangerous and far more wonderful than these aliens could possibly imagine. And in 1 week, they were going to find out exactly what that meant. The alien delegation arrived at Luna Station 3 days later in a ship that looked like a crystal flower made of metal and light. Jake Miller watched from the observation deck as the vessel docked with smooth precision. He'd spent the last 72 hours making sure everything was ready for their guests. Luna Station was humanity's first real attempt at building something impressive for alien visitors. The rotating station hung in space above the moon like a giant wheel with docking bays, living quarters, and observation areas that showed off the best views of both Earth and Luna. It was new, clean, and designed to make a good first impression. Captain Lisa Turner stood beside Jake, checking her tablet one more time. She was a career military officer who had volunteered to be humanity's liaison for alien visitors. Her short brown hair was pulled back in a neat bun, and her blue uniform was pressed and spotless. But Jake noticed the way her eyes constantly moved, scanning for potential problems or threats. It was a habit all humans had, though most aliens didn't recognize it. 12 delegates from 6 species, Lisa said, reading from her tablet. Led by Prince Hexara of the Vexstar Empire and Dr. Kicksmell from the Hegemony of Scales. The others are all young scientists and diplomats, supposedly. The best and brightest their species have to offer. Jake nodded. And they're all here to prove that humans are lying about Earth being dangerous. Should be interesting, Lisa said with a slight smile. The airlock hissed open, and the delegation walked through. Jake had met most of these species before, but seeing them together was still impressive. Prince Hexara was a Vextarian-like ambassador Zekthara, but younger and even more arrogant. His crystal-like carapace was deep purple, which Jake knew meant he considered himself very important. He walked with the confident stride of someone who had never faced real danger. Dr. Kicksmell followed behind him, her 6 arms carrying various scientific instruments. Her scales were currently a bright yellow, which meant she was excited and curious. Behind her came the others, 3 young Quartzians who looked like walking statues made of different colored stones. To Nephilim, who floated in environmental suits that contained their gaseous bodies, and for delegates from species Jake didn't immediately recognize. "Welcome to Luna Station," Lisa said, stepping forward with a smile that showed her teeth. Jake noticed several of the aliens step back, slightly. Most galactic species considered showing teeth to be a threat display, but humans smiled so naturally that they rarely thought about it. Prince Hexara looked around the docking bay with obvious disappointment. "This is your great space station? It's quite small compared to what we're used to." "It's new," Jake replied diplomatically. "We're still learning how to build in space. Earth's gravity well makes it expensive to lift materials into orbit." "Yes, I suppose that would be difficult for a species that hasn't mastered gravitational manipulation," Hexara said dismissively. Lisa's smile didn't change, but Jake saw her jaw tighten slightly. "Let me show you to your quarters. Think you'll find the accommodations comfortable." As they walked through the station's corridors, Jake noticed that the aliens were studying everything with great interest. The walls, the lighting, the way the artificial gravity worked, even the way humans moved through the space. They were clearly trying to understand how a species they considered primitive had managed to build something like this. "Your construction methods are quite interesting," Dr. Kicksmell said, running one of her hands along the wall. "Very solid, very strong. Much stronger than necessary for a space station. We like to build things that last," Lisa replied. "Teaches you not to take chances with structural integrity." They reached the guest quarters, which had been specially designed for alien visitors. Each room had adjustable atmosphere, gravity, and lighting to accommodate different species' needs. The aliens seemed impressed despite themselves. "Your hospitality systems are quite advanced," admitted one of the Quartzian delegates, a female named Christel, whose stone body was a pleasant blue color. "Thank you," Lisa said. "We want you to be comfortable during your stay." Prince Hexara looked out through the large window in the common area. Earth hung below them like a blue and white marble, beautiful and serene. "So that's your supposed Deathworld," he said with a snort. "It looked quite peaceful to me." "It does from up here," Jake agreed. "Wait until you get closer." Dr. Amy Clark arrived an hour later on the regular transport from Earth. She was a xenobiologist who had volunteered to help with the tours, mainly because she was excited to meet so many different alien species. Her enthusiasm was infectious, and Jake could see why she had been chosen for the job. "This is so exciting," Amy said as she shook hands with each delegate. The aliens found the handshaking ritual strange, but seemed to understand it was a friendly gesture. "I've been studying all of your species for months, preparing for this visit. I have so many questions." "And we have questions about your world," Dr. Kicksmell replied, her scales turning an interested green. "Your preliminary data suggests some unusual biological diversity." "Oh, you have no idea," Amy said with a grin. "Earth has more species than most planets have in their entire star systems. We've cataloged over 8 million different life forms, and we discover new ones every day." The aliens exchanged glances. That number was much higher than expected. 8 million. Prince Hexara's voice carried a note of disbelief. "That seems excessive. Most civilized worlds maintain populations of a few hundred carefully selected species." "Maintain?" Amy looked confused. You mean you control which species live on your planets? Of course, said one of the Nephilim delegates, her gaseous form pulsing with soft blue light. Dangerous or useless species are removed. Only beneficial life forms are allowed to exist. Amy stared at them for a moment, then started laughing. It wasn't a mean laugh, but it clearly made the aliens uncomfortable. Remove species? It would destroy the entire ecosystem? Every species on Earth serves a purpose, even the dangerous ones. Even the dangerous ones. Dr. Kicksmell's scales turned purple with concern. Especially the dangerous ones, Amy replied cheerfully. Predators keep prey populations healthy. Parasites prevent any one species from becoming too dominant. Disease. Organisms drive evolutionary adaptation. It's all connected. The aliens were taking notes furiously now. This was clearly not what they had expected to hear. That evening, they gathered in the station's observation lounge for dinner. The aliens had brought their own food, since most galactic species couldn't digest Earth food safely. The humans ate normal meals, which fascinated their guests. You consume the flesh of other creatures, observed Christelle, watching Lisa cut into a steak. Yes, humans are omnivores, Lisa replied. We eat both plants and animals, but you also eat plants. That are toxic to most species, Dr. Kicksmell added, pointing at Jake's salad. Those leafy greens contain alkaloids that would poison most galactic life forms. Really? Jake looked at his salad with new interest. I had no idea lettuce was toxic to aliens. Many of your common foods are, Amy explained. Chocolate, coffee, alcohol, even some fruits and vegetables. Your digestive systems can process chemicals that would kill most other species. Prince Hexara set down his eating utensil with a sharp click. So you're telling us that humans regularly consume poisonous substances for pleasure? I guess you could put it that way, Jake said with a shrug. The aliens flinched at the sudden movement again. As the evening wore on, aliens noticed other things about their human hosts. They never fully relaxed, even in the safety of the space station. Their eyes constantly moved, watching, assessing. They stood and moved in ways that suggested they were always ready for action. It was subtle, but once noticed, it was unmistakable. You seem very alert, Dr. Kicksmell mentioned to Amy as they watched Earth rotate slowly below them. Alert? Amy looked surprised. I suppose we are. You have to be. Growing up on Earth, things can go wrong quickly. What kind of things? Amy thought. For a moment, weather changes, animal encounters, equipment failures, natural disasters. You learn to pay attention to your surroundings. It's just habit. The aliens looked at each other nervously. They were beginning to realize that their hosts weren't just being cautious, they were displaying the instincts of creatures who had evolved in genuine danger. As the artificial night cycle began and the aliens retired to their quarters, Prince Hexara found himself staring out at the blue world below. It looked so peaceful, so inviting. But something about the way the humans talked about it, the way they moved and acted, suggested that appearances might be deceiving. Tomorrow they would go down to the surface. Tomorrow they would see what had shaped these strange creatures who smiled with their teeth, ate poison for pleasure, and never stopped watching for threats. Tomorrow they would begin to understand what a real Deathworld looked like. The transport shuttle shook as it entered Earth's atmosphere, and several of the alien delegates gripped their seats with obvious fear. Prince Hexara's purple carapace had turned a sickly green color, while Dr. Kicksmell's scales flashed rapid, patterns of orange and red that meant she was very nervous. Is this normal? Asked Christelle, the Quartzian delegate. As the shuttle bounced through another pocket of turbulent air, Captain Lisa Turner, who was piloting the craft, glanced back with a calm smile. Just a little atmospheric friction and some wind shear. Nothing to worry about. We'll be through it in a minute. Jake Miller sat in the co-pilot seat, watching the aliens' reactions with interest. Wait until you experience your first thunderstorm, he said conversationally. The lightning can be quite spectacular. Lightning. Dr. Kicksmell's voice cracked slightly. You mean natural electrical discharges in the atmosphere? Oh yes, Amy Clark chimed in from her seat behind them. Earth gets about 100 lightning strikes per second, planet-wide. Some bolts can reach temperatures hotter than the surface of the sun. The shuttle broke through the clouds, and suddenly the aliens could see their destination below. The Amazon rainforest stretched out like a green carpet as far as the eye could see, broken only by the winding silver thread of a massive river. "It's so... big," whispered one of the Nephilim delegates. On their gas giant homeworld, solid surfaces were rare and small. "The Amazon basin covers about 2.5 million square miles," Amy said proudly. "It contains roughly 10% of all known species on Earth. In one area?" Prince Hexara sounded shocked. "Oh, this isn't even the most diverse area," Amy continued cheerfully. "That would probably be the coral reefs, but we thought the rainforest would be a gentler introduction." The shuttle landed at a research station that had been carved out of the jungle. As the doors opened, the aliens were hit by a wall of hot, humid air that made them gasp. The air was thick and heavy, filled with moisture and strange smells. "The humidity is 95%, Lisa announced, checking her instruments. "Temperature is 86 degrees Fahrenheit. Pretty comfortable day, actually." Dr. Kicksmell stepped carefully out of the shuttle, her environmental suit sensors going crazy. "The air is filled with organic particles. Pollen, spores, microscopic organisms. How do you breathe this?" "You get used to it," said Dr. Pete Martinez, the research station director who had come to greet them. He was a tall, thin man with dark skin and kind eyes, but Jake noticed the way he constantly scanned the tree line. "The lungs adapt. Human lungs are pretty good at filtering out stuff we don't need." The aliens followed their human guides along a raised walkway that led into the forest. Within minutes, they were surrounded by green walls of vegetation that rose hundreds of feet above their heads. The noise was incredible, a constant chorus of calls, cries, buzzings, and rustlings that never stopped. "What is all that sound?" Prince Hexara asked, his compound eyes darting nervously in all directions. "Life," Amy said simply. "Birds, insects, mammals, reptiles, amphibians. Everything making noise, communicating, hunting, mating, defending territory. The forest never sleeps." 8. Dr. Kicksmell was frantically updating her threat assessment database as her sensors detected life forms all around them. "There are thousands of creatures within scanning range," she reported to the other aliens. "Thousands. Probably tens of thousands," actually, Pete corrected. "Most of them are insects." "Did you know that Earth has more species of beetles than stars in your galaxy?" "Yes." First real shock came when they reached the observation platform. Pete had prepared a small demonstration to show the aliens some of Earth's wildlife. He opened a terrarium and carefully lifted out what looked like a small, colorful frog. "This is a golden poison dart frog," he said casually, holding the tiny creature in his gloved hands. "Beautiful, isn't it?" The aliens stared at the innocent-looking amphibian, which was barely 2 inches long and bright yellow with black spots. "It's quite small," observed Christel. "Surely not dangerous?" Pete smiled. "This little guy has enough poison in its skin to kill 10 adult humans. The native people used to use the poison on their arrow tips for hunting. One touch of your bare skin to its back and you'd be dead in minutes." Several aliens stepped backward. Quickly, Dr. Kicksmell's scales turned pure white, which meant she was terrified. "And you just... pick it up?" Prince Hexar's voice was barely a whisper. "With proper protection, yes. It's not aggressive. It just wants to be left alone. The poison is purely defensive." Pete carefully returned the frog to its terrarium and led them further along the walkway. The aliens jumped at every sound now, realizing that the peaceful-looking forest around them was full of creatures that could kill them without even trying. "Oh, look at that," Amy said excitedly, pointing up into the canopy. "A harpy eagle." Aliens looked up to see a massive bird perched on a branch about 50 feet above them. It was easily 3 feet tall, with piercing yellow eyes and talons that looked like curved daggers. "It's enormous," breathed one of the Nephilim delegates. "Harpy. Eagles are one of the most powerful birds of prey in the world," Amy explained. "Those talons can exert pressure of over 200 pounds per square inch. They can snatch monkeys right out of the trees and carry them off." "And it's just sitting there watching us," Dr. Kicksmell said nervously. "It's probably curious," Pete said. "Don't worry, humans aren't its preferred prey. We're too big and we don't smell right. The phrase preferred prey made all the aliens very uncomfortable as they continued deeper into the forest. Demonstrations became more intense. Pete showed them bullet ants whose sting was rated as the most painful insect bite known to science. He pointed out venomous snakes hanging from branches above the walkway. He explained how jaguars hunted silently through the canopy, able to crush skulls with their powerful jaws. Everything here is trying to kill everything else, Prince Hexar observed, his voice tight with fear. Not kill, Pete corrected. Survive. Every creature here has evolved alongside every other creature. They've been competing for resources, avoiding predators, finding food, and reproducing for millions of years. It creates a perfect balance. Balance. Dr. Kicksmell's scales were flashing rapid patterns of confusion and terror. This is chaos. It looks like chaos if you're not used to it, Amy agreed. But there are rules, patterns, relationships. Every species has its place, its role to play. They stopped at another observation blind, where Pete had set up cameras to watch a watering hole. As they watched, a parade of animals came to drink. Beautiful birds with brilliant plumage, small deer-like creatures, colorful butterflies the size of dinner plates. See, Amy said, it's not all violence. It's incredible beauty here, too. And a jaguar emerged from the undergrowth like a shadow made solid. The aliens watched in fascination and horror as the big cat moved with liquid grace to the waters. Every other animal immediately became alert, ready to flee, but they didn't panic. This was just part of life in the forest. How do the prey animals live with such constant danger? Ask Crystal. They adapt, Pete said simply. Better senses, faster reflexes, group cooperation, camouflage. Each generation gets a little better at surviving. And the predators? They adapt to better hunting techniques, stronger bodies, sharper senses, and never stops. As the day wore on, the aliens began to understand something that chilled them to their cores. Earth wasn't just a world with dangerous animals. It was a world where every single life form was locked in constant competition with every other life form. Nothing was safe. Nothing could relax. Everything had to be ready to kill or be killed at any moment. Your entire planet is a battlefield, Dr. Keeksmell whispered, as they watched army ants march past their feet in perfect formation, each one ready to die for the colony. Not a battlefield, Jake corrected quietly. A school. Earth doesn't just kill the weak and unlucky. It teaches the survivors to be stronger, faster, smarter. Every human alive today is descended from creatures that won this game for millions of years. The aliens stared at him with new understanding. These humans weren't just lucky survivors from a dangerous world. They were the products of the most competitive environment any of them had ever imagined. As the sun set over the Amazon, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and reds, the aliens huddled together in their climate-controlled shelter. Outside, the forest grew even noisier as nocturnal hunters began their nightly hunt. Tomorrow we visit the Australian outback, Lisa announced cheerfully. You'll love it. It's much drier than here, but just as interesting. The aliens looked at each other with growing dread. If this was what Earth called a gentle introduction, what horrors awaited them in the desert? Prince Hexara stared out at the darkening forest and realized that everything he thought he knew about humans was wrong. They weren't weak creatures from a garden world. They were the survivors of hell. And tomorrow he was going to find out just how deep that hell went. The second transport shuttle landed in the red dirt of the Australian outback with a soft thud that sent up clouds of dust. The alien delegates looked out through the windows at a landscape that seemed completely different from the green jungle they had left behind. Here, everything was brown and red and gold, stretching endlessly under a sun that blazed like a white-hot coin in the blue sky. The temperature outside is 42 degrees Celsius, announced Captain Lisa Turner, checking her instruments. That's about 108 Fahrenheit. Humidity is 15%. Pretty dry day. Dr. Kicksmell's scales turned a worried yellow. That temperature would kill most galactic species within hours. Good thing you have environmental suits, said Ranger Pete Johnson, their guide for this part of the tour. He was a lean, weathered man with skin like leather and eyes that seemed to see everything. Though some humans work out here all day with just hats and water bottles, Prince Hexara stared at Pete in disbelief. You work in temperatures that would boil the blood of most civilized species? You adapt, Pete said with a shrug that made the aliens flinch. Humans are pretty good at temperature regulation. We sweat to cool down, and our blood vessels expand to dump heat. Plus, we drink lots of water. The aliens followed their human guides out of the shuttle and immediately felt the heat hit them like a physical force. Even through their protective suits, the air shimmered with heat waves, and the ground was so hot they could feel it through their boots. "Welcome to the real Australia," Pete said cheerfully. "This is actually pretty mild. In summer, it can get up to 50 degrees Celsius in some places." Amy Clark joined them, carrying a large bag of equipment. "I'm so excited to show you the wildlife here," she said. "Australia has some of the most interesting creatures on Earth." "It's interesting how?" asked Crystal, the Courtsian delegate, her blue stone body already starting to show stress fractures from the heat. "Well, let's start with something simple," Amy said, reaching into her bag. She pulled out a clear container with what looked like a small, blue octopus inside. "This is a blue-ringed octopus. Isn't it beautiful?" The creature was indeed beautiful, with bright blue rings that pulsed and glowed across its small body. It was no bigger than a golf ball. "Looks harmless," observed one of the Nephilim delegates. "That's the idea," Amy said. "It's one of the most venomous creatures on Earth. Its bite can kill an adult human in 30 minutes, and there's no antidote. The venom causes complete paralysis while you remain fully conscious." Dr. Kixmel's scales turned pure white. "And you just carry it around in a container?" "Safe container," Amy corrected. "Don't worry, it can't get out, and they're not aggressive unless threatened." Pete led them along a dusty trail that wound between red rocks and scrubby bushes. "Now, the thing about Australia," he said conversationally, "is that most of our animals have learned to be dangerous because everything else here is trying to kill them too." "Give us an example," Prince Hexara said nervously. Well, let's see." Pete stopped and pointed to a tree about 20 feet away. "See that drop bear up there?" The aliens looked up and saw what appeared to be a cute furry creature sitting in the branches. It looked like a small bear with big round ears and a black nose. "It looks adorable," said Crystal. "That's a koala," Amy corrected with a laugh. "Hey, Pete's just joking about the drop bear thing. Though they do have sharp claws. But they only eat eucalyptus leaves, which are toxic to most other animals." "Toxic leaves?" Dr. Kixmel was taking notes frantically. "Very toxic," Amy confirmed. "Eucalyptus contains compounds that would poison most mammals, but koalas have special bacteria in their stomachs that break down the toxins. They can eat something that would kill almost any other creature." Pete grinned. "And speaking of things that will kill you," he stopped walking and pointed at the ground near their feet. "See that?" The aliens looked down and saw what appeared to be a stick lying across the path. Then the stick moved slightly, and they realized it was a snake, a very large snake with brown and tan patterns along its back. "That's a king brown snake," Pete said calmly. "Also called a mulga snake. About 6 feet long, I'd guess. Very venomous. Its bite can kill a horse." The aliens scrambled backwards so fast that several of them fell over. Dr. Kixmel's scales flashed panic colors while Prince Hexara's carapace turned almost black with fear. "Why aren't you running?" Prince Hexara demanded. "'Cause it's not aggressive unless we threaten it," Pete explained. "We'll just go around. Most Australian snakes prefer to avoid humans if they can." "Most." Dr. Kixmel's voice cracked. "Well, there are exceptions. Taipans can be pretty cranky. And death adders like to hide and strike at anything that steps near them. Oh, and there's the fierce snake, which has the most toxic venom of any land snake on Earth." As they carefully walked around the snake, Amy continued her educational tour. "Australia has about 21 of the world's 25 most venomous snakes, plus the most venomous spider, the most venomous jellyfish, and some of the most venomous fish. This entire continent is a death trap," whispered one of the Nephilim delegates. "What a—" "Not really," Pete said. You just have to know what to watch out. 4. Australians learn from childhood how to spot dangerous animals and what to do if you encounter them. They reached a small research station where Pete had prepared another demonstration. Now, I want to show you something really special, he said. Putting on thick gloves and reaching into a terrarium, he pulled out what looked like a large, hairy spider with legs as thick as pencils. The aliens immediately backed away as far as they could get. This is a huntsman spider, Pete said, letting the huge spider walk across his gloved hands. Look at the size of this beauty, a leg span of about 6 inches. Is it venomous? Dr. Kicksmell asked from a safe distance. Not dangerous to humans, Pete replied. Painful bite, but not deadly. These guys are actually helpful. They eat the really dangerous spiders? There are more dangerous spiders? Prince Hexara's voice was barely a whisper. Oh yeah. Funnel web spiders, redback spiders, mouse spiders. Australia has some of the most venomous arachnids on Earth. But don't worry, most people only die from spider bites a few times per year. Only a few times per year? Dr. Kicksmell's scales were flashing so rapidly, they looked like a strobe light. That's pretty good considering how many dangerous spiders we have, Amy pointed out. Australians are very good at avoiding them and treating bites quickly. As the day continued, the demonstrations became even more alarming. Pete showed them photographs of saltwater, crocodiles that could grow over 20 feet long and had bite forces stronger than any other animal on Earth, Amy explained. About box jellyfish, whose tentacles could deliver enough venom to kill 60 adult humans. They learned about blue-ringed octopi, cone snails, and stonefish. And let's not forget the big stuff, Pete added. Great white sharks off the coast, which can be 20 feet long and weigh 3 tons. Saltwater crocodiles in the north that are basically living dinosaurs. Inland, we have feral water buffalo that way as much as small spacecraft. But perhaps the most disturbing revelation came when they stopped for lunch at the research station, as the aliens watched in horror. As their human guides calmly ate sandwiches and drank coffee while sitting outside in the blazing heat. Aren't you concerned about all these deadly creatures? Asked Crystal.
Ow.
You learn to live with it, Pete said, taking a bite of his sandwich. Most Australians grow up knowing which creatures to avoid and how to treat injuries if something goes wrong. It's just part of life. But why do you stay? Dr. Kicksmell asked. Why not live somewhere safer? Pete and Amy looked at each other and laughed. Where would we go? Amy asked. Every place on Earth has its own dangers. Australia just happens to have some very obvious ones. Besides, Pete added, this is home. The land shapes you, makes you tough, teaches you to pay attention, most Australians. Wouldn't want to live anywhere else. The aliens spent the rest of the day in a state of growing shock as they realized that humans didn't just survive on this death world. They chose to live in the most dangerous parts of it. Children grew up learning to identify dozens of creatures that could kill them. Adults worked and played in environments that would be considered uninhabitable by galactic standards. As the sun began to set, painting the red rocks in brilliant shades of orange and purple, the alien delegation huddled together in their air-conditioned transport. Tomorrow we visit the Arctic, Lisa announced. It'll be a nice change from the heat. Dr. Kicksmella's scales turned a sickly green color. What fresh horrors await us in this Arctic? Jake Miller, who had been quietly observing the aliens' reactions all day, finally spoke up. The Arctic isn't about venomous creatures or poisonous plants, he said quietly. It's about something much more fundamental. Prince Hexara asked, though he clearly didn't want to know the answer. Survival, Jake said simply. Pure basic survival against a world that actively tries to freeze you to death. It's where you learn that the planet itself can be your enemy. Aliens stared out at the darkening landscape of red rocks and scrubby vegetation, where thousands of deadly creatures were beginning their nightly hunt for food. They were starting to understand that Earth wasn't just dangerous in obvious ways. It was dangerous in every possible way. The transport shuttle descended through thick gray clouds toward the Arctic Research Station, and the alien delegates pressed their faces to the windows in amazement. Below them stretched an endless white wasteland that seemed to go on forever. In every direction, there were no trees, no plants, no signs of life at all, just ice and snow under a pale, cold sun. The external temperature is minus 38 degrees Celsius, Captain Lisa Turner announced. That's minus 36 Fahrenheit. Wind speed is 40 miles per hour, which brings the effective temperature down to about minus 55 Celsius. Kicksmell's scales had turned a dull gray color that meant she was beyond fear and into complete shock. Nothing can live in those conditions. Actually, quite a few things live here, said Dr. Susan Davis, their guide for the Arctic portion of the tour. She was a small, cheerful woman with bright blue eyes and short blonde hair. Despite the fact that they were heading into one of the most hostile environments on Earth, she seemed completely relaxed. Polar bears, seals, Arctic foxes, caribou, various birds. Even some plants managed to grow during the short summer. Prince Hexar stared out at the white landscape with something approaching despair. How is any of this possible? The cold alone should kill everything instantly. Life finds a way, Susan said with a smile. It always does. Earth has taught us that there's almost nowhere that some creature can't learn to survive. The shuttle landed at the research station with a soft bump, and immediately the aliens could hear the wind howling outside like a living thing trying to tear the building apart. Ice crystals struck the windows with sharp ticking sounds. Welcome to the Arctic, Susan said, putting on a thick parka over her regular clothes. The station keeps us warm and safe, but I thought you might like to experience the real environment for a few minutes. You want us to go outside? Dr. Kicksmell's voice was barely a whisper. Just briefly and fully protected, Susan assured her. I think it's important for you to understand what cold really means. The aliens reluctantly put on the special environmental suits that had been prepared for them. These were much heavier and more complex than their previous protective gear. With multiple heating systems and thick insulation, even with all this protection, they felt nervous about stepping outside. Jake Miller pulled on his own gear, which the aliens noticed was much lighter than theirs. Human cold-weather gear, he explained, when he saw them staring. We've been dealing with environments like this for thousands of years. Susan opened the airlock door. Immediately the aliens were hit by a blast of air so cold it felt like being stabbed with ice knives. Even through their suits, they could feel the brutal power of the Arctic wind. This is impossible, gasped Prince Hexara, his compound eyes watering from the cold. How does anything survive this? Adaptation, Susan said, her voice clear and calm despite the howling wind. Thick fur, layers of fat, behavioral changes, hibernation. Arctic animals have developed dozens of different ways to deal with the cold. They walked a short distance from the station, and the aliens realized something that filled them with terror. The cold wasn't just uncomfortable, it was actively trying to kill them. You could feel it searching for any weakness in there. Protective suits, any gap where it could get in and freeze their bodies solid. How long would an unprotected human survive out here? Asked Crystal, her stone body already showing stress fractures from the temperature change. It depends on the conditions and the person's experience, Susan replied matter-of-factly. In these conditions, probably 15 to 30 minutes before hypothermia sets in. Maybe an hour before death, depending on clothing and shelter. And yet humans live here? Dr. Kicksmell's voice was muffled by her suit's heating system. The Inuit people have lived in the Arctic for thousands of years, Jake explained. They've learned to hunt seals through holes in the ice, build shelters from snow blocks, and navigate across trackless ice fields using only the stars and wind patterns. Susan led them to an observation blind where they could watch Arctic wildlife. Even in this frozen wasteland, there was life. They saw Arctic foxes with thick white fur, hunting for small prey under the snow. They watched seals surface at breathing holes in the ice, only to disappear again when a massive polar bear approached. That polar bear weighs about 800 pounds, Susan said, pointing to the huge white predator. It can run 35 miles per hour across ice and snow. Its paws are the size of dinner plates, and its claws can tear through steel cables. And humans hunt these creatures? Prince Hexara asked in disbelief. Traditional hunters do, yes, with spears and boats made from animal skins. It's been done for generations. The aliens watched in stunned silence as the polar bear demonstrated its power by smashing through ice that was several inches thick to reach the water below. The casual display of raw strength was terrifying, but the real horror came when Susan began explaining what the Arctic meant to human development. This environment taught humans some of our most important survival skills, she said, as they walked back toward the station. Planning ahead, because you can't gather food in winter. Cooperation, because no one survives alone in conditions like this. Tool-making, because you need the right equipment or you die. Problem-solving, because every day brings new challenges. You're saying this place made humans smarter? Dr. Kicksmell asked. Smarter, tougher, more cooperative, Jake confirmed. Arctic. Conditions don't forgive mistakes. You learn to think ahead, work together, and never give up, or your entire tribe dies. Back inside the warm station, the aliens huddled together while their human guides calmly removed their outer gear and went about their normal activities. The contrast was stark and unsettling. I need to understand something, Prince Hexera said, his carapace still showing stress colors. You've shown us jungles full of poison and predators. Deserts that cook you alive and are filled with venomous creatures. Now frozen wastelands that kill you just by existing. How do humans cope with all of this? Amy Clark, who had joined them for the final part of the tour, smiled. We don't just cope with it. We excel because of it. Explain, Dr. Kicksmell demanded, her scales flashing confused patterns. Every human alive today is the product of millions of years of survival on this planet, Jake said quietly. Our ancestors survived ice ages, volcanic eruptions, floods, droughts, plagues, and predators that would terrify most galactic species. We're not just adapted to Earth's dangers, we're forged by them. Susan nodded. Right. Earth doesn't just kill the unlucky or weak. It teaches the survivors to be stronger, faster, smarter, more cooperative. Every generation that survives is better than the last at dealing with challenges. What are you saying? Prince Hexara's voice was barely a whisper. You're saying that humans aren't just another species that happens to live on a dangerous planet. Amy explained. We're the product of the most competitive, challenging, unforgiving environment the galaxy has ever produced. We're what happens when a world tries to kill everything on it for millions of years, and some creatures refuse to die. The aliens looked at each other in growing understanding and fear. They had come to Earth expecting to find weak creatures from a garden world who were exaggerating their planet's dangers. Instead, they had discovered something that shook them to their cores. You're all predators, Dr. Kicksmell said finally, her scales turning a deep purple that meant she was terrified, but also awed. We're all survivors, Jake corrected gently. But yes, every human has the capacity for violence when threatened. Earth taught us that. We're pack hunters, who learned to cooperate because working together was the only way to survive in a world that was constantly trying to kill us. But you're also ... Prince Hexara struggled to find the words. You're kind, helpful. You smile and share food and show concern for others. Because cooperation is survival, Susan explained. Humans who worked together lived longer and had more children. Humans who shared resources and protected each other's young survived when loners died. Earth didn't just make us tough, it made us social. As the alien delegation prepared to return to their ship, they carried with them a completely new understanding of humanity and Earth. The Deathworld classification wasn't about the obvious dangers, the storms, the predators, the hostile environments. It was about what those dangers had created. A species of incredibly adaptable, cooperative, resilient creatures who saw challenges as opportunities and who had learned to thrive in conditions that would destroy most other forms of life. So, Captain Turner asked as they waited in the shuttle for departure clearance, "What will you tell the Galactic Council about Earth's Deathworld status?" Prince Hexera looked out at the white wasteland where humans somehow managed to live and work and raise families, and slowly shook his head. "We'll tell them that we were fools," he said quietly. "We'll tell them that Earth isn't just a death world. It's a forge that creates the strongest, smartest, most dangerous species the galaxy has ever seen. And we'll tell them that humanity isn't just another member species. What are we then?" Jake asked. Prince Hexara's compound eyes met Jake's steady gaze. "You're either going to be our greatest allies or our most terrifying enemies. And after seeing what your world made you into, I really hope it's the first one.